Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Breathe Better podcast. In today's episode, I'd actually like to talk about mental health and my experience of counselling, depression, anxiety, and therapy, and blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. And and also substance abuse and stuff like that. So it might be quite a heavy episode, but I think something I would like to normalize is conversations about this sort of stuff. So actually talking about things that are quite difficult, and I don't know, just sharing them a little bit more. I think there's quite a lot of I don't know. You can tell I'm in a bit of a weird space today. There's a generally feeling a little bit low today and last night as well. And interestingly, it was only when I actually sort of stopped to meditate or do some Reiki last night that I actually discovered that I was feeling quite sort of somber or quite low, I guess. And I think that sort of fed into today a little bit as well. And today I was just sort of loitering, so to speak. So I went down to pick up my antidepressants and in North Berwick. So yeah, just a little bit of loitering, a couple hours of just sort of hanging around with people like my parents, and then my brother, and then a few friends, and then my sister, and it just generally procrastinating. Like I have the whole day to myself today. Louise is working, so it's just a whole day to myself, and I know in myself that when I'm procrastinating going home or doing something for myself, like it's a really nice day, I could go out for a walk, but instead I don't want to. I have absolutely no energy to go out and walk. I can't be arsed. And this is one thing that I think people really struggle to understand about depression, is that it's not that I don't want to go outside and I want to go off and do things and etc etc, but I don't have the fucking energy to do it. Even on antidepressants, I'm exhausted quite a lot of the time. Yes, my mood is more stable, and yes, I do actually feel quite good a lot of the time, but I still just don't have the energy. So I just don't have the energy. And it really bothers me when people sort of say like, "Oh, I don't know how you can't have the energy to do stuff. Like, just get on with it. Like, just fuck off. Like, you don't have a fucking clue." But anyway, sorry. That's sort of, I guess, just me roundabout explaining why I might have a little, or a few more little groggy moments like that one that just happened, where I can't think of anything to say or what I'm talking about, and I might get a little bit lost. Now, one thing I've actually wanted to do on this podcast for a while is, rather oddly, is to share some of my experience of substance abuse. And for me, I smoked weed for a very long time. I started smoking weed when I was 18. Well, let me put it this way, I started smoking weed every day when I was about 18 or 19. It was when I first moved into my own flat and I lived by myself, and I was working as a chef. And what did I do at night? I drank alcohol and I smoked weed. Sometimes, well, if not all the time, actually, I done both. Pretty much every single night, I would have a drink, or I would smoke, or both. Every night, the whole time that I lived there. And smoking pretty much continued on every day, except with a few blips here and there of, like, I'd maybe stop for a week or two, or have a break through the week, or I'd run out of weed or something. So I smoked like copious amounts of grass over the years. And actually, I'm going to pull it up on my phone. When I actually managed to finally stop. Because it was massive. It was a huge thing for me, and that was one of the things that I am most proud of ever, is stopping smoking. So the amount of time that I've not smoked weed is now 2 years and 5 days, which is fucking huge. That is definitely something to celebrate. And just while I'm on the app as well, it's in that time I've saved over £7,350 that I would have otherwise spent on weed, and now that is not including tobacco as well. And I have saved, and in this context, I'm talking about time. So I have saved 2,205 hours And what I mean by that is that every day, let's say 3 hours of my day, for example, and that's being quite light. Yeah, that's being quite light. Um, in regards to how much time I would actually spend high or smoking or etc. That is 2,205 hours of my time. And when you divide that by 24, so, days, that gives you 91 days. So in 2 years, 91 days of my time would have been spent smoking, or at least so high that I wasn't capable of doing anything fucking else. So, yes, I would like to try and change the narrative that weed can be a negative drug. Now, some people have varying different emotions and thoughts on this as well. A lot of people say you can't get addicted to weed because it's not an addictive substance. That is absolute crap. You can get addicted to anything. Even Gabor Mate has an addiction to, what was it, buying classical CDs or something, or buying classical records? I can't remember. Shopping is an addiction. Like, eating can be an addiction. It's just absolute nonsense to say that you can't be addicted to smoking weed. And I have felt so much over this, so much like anger over the fact that people have essentially dismissed what I was addicted to, um, because they say that you can't get addicted to smoking weed, and people still do it. Like I was actually talking to someone at my work about this like a couple of weeks ago, because they were like, "Oh, I bet you smoked a lot of weed in your life," just because of how I am as a person. They're like, "I bet you used to smoke weed," and I was like, "Yeah, I did. I had a big problem with smoking weed. I was actually addicted to it." And they were like, "What? You can't get addicted to weed?" And then that led to the conversation that I'm just relaying to you. Um, and I used it to numb. I used it for a lot of reasons, actually. I used it to numb, to escape the world. I used it to enhance something so I could feel something. I used it to socialize. I used it to, hide behind. I just the uses I have for weed are, or I did have for weed, sorry, are just uh, tenfold. I have no idea how many different uses I have for it, and I hold a lot of sort of shame over, or I did hold a lot of shame over like smoking, especially when I was a teacher, because I was still smoking when I was a teacher. Been teaching for 4 years, and I stopped smoking weed 2 years ago. So do the math. I was smoking for 2 years. Still smoking cigarettes as well, until about 2 years ago as well. And just yeah, I'm not saying weed as a thing is like, I'm not demonizing it, because it was my use of it. It was my abuse of it that was bad. It wasn't necessarily weed itself. Now, in a sort of purer form, I do believe weed can be helpful. Not um, psychoactive element of the THC of weed. I don't actually think that's particularly helpful at all. I do believe that the CBD element, the non psychoactive elements of weed, sorry, so the like medicinally beneficial part of weed is actually very, very useful, and should be legalized a little bit more in sense. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. So yeah, I used to smoke and I drank an awful lot, very badly. I wouldn't say that I was an alcoholic. Was I a problem drinker? Like, absolutely. And that sort of comes and goes, and has come and go over my life. And I don't actually drink or smoke anymore, and I'm actually very, very proud of that. And I'm very, very, actually, yeah, very fucking proud of the fact that I've managed to stop drinking as well. Really proud of that. So, yeah, what I have to share today is my sort of a little bit of, well, obviously a bit of chat about that, and my counselling or my journey into counselling, from obviously not being in counselling, sort of my journey into discovering I had depression and anxiety and all this sort of stuff. So, I first went to the doctor saying that I was depressed when I was working as a chef. I was the head chef at the time. I was 20. I want to say 21, possibly 22. I can't quite remember. My memory's really bad, and well, who wonders, eh? My memory's pretty bad. I think I was 22 when I first went to the doctor saying that I was depressed, So that would be 6 years ago now, 5, 6 years ago. And I specifically said I don't want medication. Fast forward 6 years, and guess what? You're on medication. But I specifically said I don't want antidepressants. I don't want medication. I wanted sleeping pills. Is what I want. I had really bad insomnia at the time. My anxiety was through the roof. I was having panic attacks. I was getting heart palpitations. I was getting pains in my chest all the time. I didn't know what any of this was. No, I had no idea this was anxiety. Um, I was just struggling with all this stuff, and I didn't have a fucking clue. And I was massively disconnected from my partner at the time. We were just fucking at the end of the road, essentially. And yeah, so I didn't take medication to start with, and I'm glad I didn't, because I explored a lot of different methodologies and different patterns and stuff in the time that I didn't have medication. So essentially, yeah, I went to the doctors and said, like, look, I'm fucking depressed. I don't want to live. Etc. etc. Like, I feel like this all the time, and yada yada, the usual story. And even just going to the doctors and telling someone that was a massive thing for me. Like, I never opened up. I didn't talk about my emotions in that way. I didn't talk about stuff that was bad. I didn't understand them. I didn't have a fucking clue what I was actually experiencing, about from the fact that I was fucking miserable all the time. Like, I had no energy. I had no energy to do anything. The only thing I wanted to do was smoke weed. That's all I wanted to do. On my time off, when I wasn't working, all I wanted to do was sit and smoke weed. That's all I wanted to do. And you tell me that's not a fucking addiction. Like, anyway, so yeah, and essentially I got passed on to counselling services, but I had to wait, I think, 6 months before I would get the joy of going into counselling and actually getting a therapist or a counsellor. And so lo and behold, then left a very long and arduous journey of waiting for a counsellor. Now, during this time, my mental health got worse. There was one time that I was drunk. I think I just split up with my partner. I was in the process of moving home, but I didn't want to stay at home, and I didn't want to stay at my flat, so I was staying on my friend's couch, and I went to the pub. And oh no, sorry, this was before I ended up staying on my friend's couch. So I went to the pub, ended up absolutely fucking steaming, and blacked out. Now, I used to black out a lot when I drank, because obviously I'd been smoking all the time as well. So, and yeah, I blacked out, and I sort of came to, and oh, this is quite important. I lived right next to the sea, so I'd actually came to, sorry, I lived next to the sea, and I'd actually came to when I was like up to my waist in water. And blah de blah, you can kind of see where that's going. But I ended up coming out, and it was guilt. It was guilt that pulled me out of that. Guilt for that action. And you can probably guess or read between the lines about what I was probably trying to achieve when I was drunk and blacked out. But I didn't. I came to, and I essentially pulled myself out. And I can still smell the smell of the sea on my clothes the next morning. I can still smell that. I think that smell will be forever burned into my mind. And for whatever purpose, it shall stay there. So yeah. Anyway, moving on. Obviously, at that point, my depression was at a fucking all-time control over me. I was completely consumed by darkness and shit and sadness, and constantly thinking about not wanting to be here every other day or every day, or always having these thoughts, or thinking that I wasn't good enough and that I was a fucking wasted space, and yada yada yada. You understand. Well, you can imagine, maybe. So yeah, I eventually got counselling, and the counselling I got was mindfulness-based cognitive behavioural therapy, because they thought that would tie in quite well to the stuff that I was doing in yoga and meditating and stuff like that. And did it help? Yeah. Was it a plaster for something that was not going to go away? Yeah, that's what it was. I do think that CBT was helpful for me at the time, and I do think it really did serve me quite well. But there's definitely different modalities that work a lot better for me. Therapy is especially, and is very good. It kind of feels like mindfulness based CBT is sort of like, just don't think about it, or like, let's just ground yourself back in your body, away from your thoughts and stuff like that, which did help massively. It genuinely did help. And there's a story I'd like to actually share about the time that I actually had. So I think it was 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and I think it was like every Monday morning or something for a couple hours, and then yeah, yeah, every Monday morning I think for a couple hours, and I think it was maybe the fourth or fifth week that I went in, and over the weekend or the day before, I think I was in between jobs at this point, or working with my brother. Oh, I was working with my brother. Yeah, I remember now. And I had taken ecstasy over the weekend at a party, and I was fucking not feeling great at all. I was still smoking at this time when I was in counselling, and that's not something that I wanted to discuss or bring up or anything like that. I still smoked cigarettes, I still smoked weed, I still drank, and I did take drugs at this time as well. Occasionally, not an awful lot. But I had in this time taken ecstasy over the weekend, and I remember the facilitator or the counsellor lady, who was lovely. Can't remember her name for the life of me, but I remember her coming up to me and asking me if I was okay, because obviously I probably looked like death warmed up, to be perfectly honest, in this counselling room. Funnily enough, it's actually a room that I've taught yoga in since, which I think is quite funny. And yeah, I was just in an absolutely miserable place, really miserable place that I just made myself worse. And for those of you who've never taken like uppers of that sort or drugs of that sort, don't. I'm not condoning drug use at all, to be fair, unless it's in a sort of safe capacity. But it essentially used up every little last ounce of happy that I had left, so I could use it in a condensed space of time, i.e., over a party, and then spend the next 3 weeks to 3 months feeling like death, like there was no point existing. It was horrible, and that's eventually why I stopped taking drugs of that sort, because it just left me feeling rubbish, so rubbish that I can't even put it into words. Like, it just made me feel horrendous. So that was my first experience of counselling, was that, and obviously, as you can see or hear, like, I was still, pretty toxic at the time. I was in a bad place. I was still very self-destructive. I didn't have a clear intention of my path. I was out of a job. And it did help. Yeah, it helped a little bit with me cope. We did have, like, not to say homework, but stuff that we could do, like, outside of that kind of helped manage emotions. And actually, for me, just get to know my emotions. I think that was the best thing that I took away from mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, or the counselling, was that I got to know my emotions a bit more, and actually get, like, familiarise myself with myself. And that was important, because I didn't have a fucking clue what was going on or what I was feeling or anything, and it's pretty intense, as you can imagine. So yeah, obviously I've not actually told my family half of these stories, so if you're listening, apologies. And isn't that funny? It's so much easier to tell a microphone than it is your own family sometimes. But yeah, so that was my first experience of counselling. And my next experience, fast forward a few years, was actually writing therapy with my previous therapist. And she was quite good. I really liked the writing therapy. I could do it at my home. It was online courses that I'd done with her, and she would sort of guide us through writing prompts and meditations and sort of contemplative practices and stuff, and offer us a lot of space to also talk about that and community and things, and it was really good. It was really good. I got a lot out of the writing therapy, and that was actually why I went on to do psychotherapy with that therapist later on, after I'd done the writing courses. I think I'd done 2 writing courses in total, and then I went on to like weekly and then bi-weekly therapy and blah blah blah. I've been in therapy for, what's that? We're in 2024 now, so going on, I want to say 3 or 4 years, on and off. I guess 6 years on and off. Seeing as I started counselling when I was 21 or 22. Sorry, this must be a nightmare to listen to today. But anyway, I actually have my journals from that time, and I have 3 of them right in front of me. I have 3 journals in front of me. One of them from when I first started my writing therapy. Unfortunately, I don't have any from when I first started counselling 7 years ago, because I didn't really journal back then at all, and I'm almost glad I didn't, because I don't really want to read back over that, to be honest. I think that would be quite difficult. But here we are. I have a journal entry from Tuesday the 9th of February, and this will be 2021. So this was when my granddad had passed away. Just possibly. There is actually a journal entry from when he passed away as well. I was just flicking through it, and this is something that I wanted to share for a while. Was, I guess, the part of it to showcase a little part of the addiction. So like an entry here. Smoking is definitely holding me back immensely, but I feel it stems from loneliness. You know, there's a little entry from there. Overall, a very lethargic day. Hopefully tomorrow will be a more energetic. And then on one underneath, you're on the right path. It feels like 2 feet are heading in the same direction now. Well, that was nonsense. Fast forward 7 days. So with that that entry that I've just read, that wasn't all of it. I don't want to share all of it. I just want to share some parts of it. So that was on the 9th of February. So at that time, I'd also said that I wanted to stop smoking. I was sick of having to come back to the same conversation. And then fast forward 7 days. Crap day led to a full day being depressed and having absolutely zero energy at all. I fell out of my routines, this and that. Not happy about it at all, but I'm trying not to dwell on it. I just feel bored, tired, sad, fed up, and just generally pissed off. I'm getting very sick of lockdown, or this whole lockdown thing, and just need to pull my mindset back together. And it's actually quite nicely, it says, chin up, everyone has bad days, don't let it ruin your week and your outlook. And then in big letters, there's a couple of things that I really wanted to get or reaffirm, which was like practicing my yoga again daily, like stop drinking, no cigarettes, communicate more with people, and in big letters, no weed. Like, so stop smoking weed. So that's 7 days later, and I'm once again back into smoking. And fast forward another couple of days, and once again I'm smoking again. And then another couple of days, oh look, I've been smoking the whole weekend after saying I wasn't going to smoke anymore. So, and then here's one here. Another groggy weekend morning where I smoked 3 grams from Thursday to Saturday. This was obviously a time when I'd stopped trying to smoke. And in terms of money, 3 grams, that at the time, that would probably be about 25-30 quid. So that's 3 days, spent 30 quid, like tenner a day almost. And then it says, today was hard to crush the desire to smoke and numb myself out. And I said, I truly believe that if I can crush this desire, I will succeed in my search for happiness and joy. A few days of discomfort and maybe in a lack of sleep will be how this, and every week, starts at this moment. Is this what I want? Short answer, no. And then obviously I tried to contemplate on it for a little while. And then it says, every answer to that fucking question is no. So it's a little bit sad looking back on this and sort of reading the conflict that I was constantly facing. And like, obviously I wanted to smoke, as I've said like 5 minutes ago. Like I wanted to smoke really badly. It's what gave me an escape. What gave me a sense of contentment. I'd usually done it when I was around at a friend's house. So like I was socializing, I wasn't alone, stuck in my head, like thinking all of these horrible thoughts. And then in this little entry, it goes on to say that, asking myself, like, is this what I want to continue to smoke all the time, essentially? And it says, and then I obviously sat and listened to it, and it said, like, the loneliness inside me is literally crying out in every possible way that the answer to that is no. And in fact, smoking is definitely not what I want to do. It is not, full stop. And it says, I want to live, breathe, share, experience, and I need to find my own way of manifesting that. Maybe I need to find a new group or tribe. But how does one go on to find a tribe, quote, end quote. And then I say, I guess over time that'll happen. And I also guess that loneliness is an underlying emotion right now, possibly due to being a tad disconnected and flat. And I think noticing that is enough, and awareness is my key to the locked door of change. Oh, how thoughtful, Gareth. And practice, live and feel, and all else will fall into place. So yeah, quite some heavy thoughts. in general. And then guess what? A couple of days later, smoking again. A couple of days later, smoking again. I think at that time I must have just been smoking at the weekend. And I go on and on and on in this journal about, you know, smoking and how I feel about it. And it's the same. It's the same every fucking time. It all came down to, well, it didn't all, but loneliness was something that I'd pinned it as, I'd pegged it as, and it wasn't. That was part of it. Yeah, like I smoked because I felt lonely, so I would go around to my friend's house and I'd smoke, and I would be in company. But in actual fact, like I used to smoke it by myself all the fucking time as well. So that's not what it was. I think I used that as an excuse, like, oh, I go and smoke because I feel lonely, so I'm not lonely anymore. And yeah, I know myself that I didn't smoke so much because I was lonely. It was a whole like fucking smorgasbord of stuff. I don't even know if that's the right word, but a whole load of stuff was the reason that I used to smoke. And I've totally abused the fuck out of weed. And myself, in turn, when you actually sort of look at it. So it took me ages to stop smoking weed. It really did. It wasn't until I actually met Louise that I'd finally stopped smoking. And you know why I think I managed to stop smoking was because I could see a different path for the first time. I could see a different life for myself. I didn't feel stuck. I started to feel like things could change. Because I was very lonely for a long time. I really was. I was very lonely for a very long time. And yeah, I could talk to people about it, but I didn't achieve anything. Because once again, I was still depressed. You know, I was still wildly depressed. Like I would have weeks where I didn't have any energy whatsoever. I wouldn't practice yoga because guess what? I didn't have any fucking energy. I knew it would help me. I knew it would make me feel a little bit better. Would it cure my depression? Absolutely fucking not. Of course it can't do that. It could help me feel a little bit more energized or like focused or whatever and not so like ugh, like fucking horrible. But guess what? Yoga can't cure depression. Spoiler alert. It can't do that. Yoga can do a lot of things, but it cannot cure your depression, unfortunately. Trust me, I've tried. So yeah, totally getting no, I'm not getting off track, but just to bring it back to the sort of counselling and therapy and stuff. So yeah, I was lonely for a very long time, and I don't know why. I I don't know a definitive reason as to I can tell you as to why I smoked, except the fact that I numbed from the world from it. I used it as a tool to escape, but also enhance my experience. I use it as a tool to socialize. I use it as a tool to fucking I don't know. I've literally smoked myself into debt at times. Like, you know, I've spent so much on it. It's actually fucking disgusting. Like as I said earlier, like 7 grand I've saved in 2 years. That's a lot of money to just have to waste to go up in flames every day. And oh, you know. Anyway, so yeah, therapy. The writing therapy I found very useful. But after a time, and even reflecting back on it now, the writing that or the even the way that I wrote was performative. So it was like I don't know if you heard that. That was the guy downstairs shouting. It was like it was performative. So it was like I was writing for someone else to read it, and I don't know, be impressed by how reflective I was, or this or that. And like that's crap. Like yeah, maybe some little bits of information will come out, or maybe like a deeper part of myself might pour out. But really, not. Maybe not. Because it just eventually felt very performative, and that's what I was trying to get away from, was trying to perform for whatever reason, you know. Anyway, so the writing therapy was quite useful, and I do journal. I do believe in journaling is very helpful for me to get. It's almost somatic in a way, because it's like pen to paper, you know, like you're doing something with your hand and you're thinking at the same time, and you're maybe, I don't know, talking out loud if you're crazy like me. So yeah, the writing was very helpful, and journaling I do find quite helpful, even if it's just a case of like getting all of the crap and the shit that's in your head out of it and onto paper, just so that it's got somewhere to go. Great, I think that's quite helpful. Or as I say, maybe it's for reflecting on things or getting a little bit deeper. Like I use journaling to reflect on like philosophical concepts in yoga and stuff, and I find that to be very helpful. for getting a bit of a deeper understanding of how I show up in that, or how that shows up in me. For instance, like non-violence, for example, or truthfulness, or stealing, or lying, all that stuff. Um, so yeah, eventually I started doing talking therapy after writing therapy, or writing counselling, or whatever you would call it. And the talking therapy was quite useful for me, but I done it for a few years. I think it was 2.5 years potentially. On, I think it was every second week, and then sometimes every week, and then sometimes every second week, and yeah, I started on every 2 weeks, I think, because I couldn't afford to do it every week. So therapy is very expensive, but it's worth it. I would say, I really would say that it's worth it. I would pay any amount of money to continue on the path that I'm doing with therapy. To get to know myself better and to understand a sense of belonging, and to get to know my conditioning and my patterns and my reactions, and to know why I react to things in a certain way. I think that's completely invaluable. You can't put a price on that. So yeah, I started doing talking therapy, and for me, this was useful, but it got to a point where it wasn't useful anymore, and it was interesting because I started to dissociate a lot in some of the sessions, and we would kind of sit with it, and I would be left feeling quite miserable for a little while, maybe like a couple of days, maybe a week after, just for however long. And in hindsight, maybe that wasn't such a good thing, but whatever. So yeah, talking therapy helped for me, but only to a certain point. I find at the moment I'm actually doing EMDR therapy, which is wild, absolutely wild, and I'll get onto that in a little bit. But I really get a lot of art therapy, and essentially what that is I just draw crap. I just make colors, and like I like to use chalk and pastel and stuff, and just fucking scribble shapes and shit onto a bit of paper, but while I'm talking about stuff. So it helps me to get into places that I can't get into. And I actually had a session like a couple of months ago where I hadn't picked up a pen or a pastel or whatever. I hadn't started writing, or I hadn't started drawing anything, and I was just talking about stuff, and I got to the point where I just kind of went blank, and my head went blank, and I couldn't talk about it anymore. So we sort of took a step back and circled back around to it eventually. But I started to draw, and I started to make, I think I was just drawing circles or something, patterns. And after I started drawing it, guess what? I could actually access that memory, and I could actually access some elements of that part of me that I couldn't get to before. And that's the wonder of art therapy, is that it helps connect the neural pathways between both sides of the brain. I'm not going to get into the science because I don't know about it. My partner would very much be able to tell you much more of the science on it, because my partner is also an art therapist. And disclaimer, no, I'm not doing art therapy with my partner. That is not okay. I'm doing it with someone else. And yeah, one day I will actually have Louise on here to talk all about art therapy and the process of that, because it is fucking mental. It is really mental. And yeah, so this is why art therapy is really good for me, is because I can't get to it just from talking. I can't get to my problems just from talking about it and accessing it, because I can't. Like, my body won't let me. It literally will not let me access those memories unless I have a route around it. And in that sense, that's art therapy for me. Like, I can draw on the paper, and like it distracts my body. Well, and this is how I understand it anyway. It helps me stay connected to my body, and it, I guess, distracts it a little bit, so that I can access that memory and like process it and know that I'm safe in a safe environment, etc. And obviously my therapist is wonderful at managing to achieve that as well, and holding a safe space, and just attending to my needs, and tuning and all that sort of stuff, and like yada yada. But yeah, I find art therapy tremendously helpful for me as a person, as a man who can't access his feelings or can't access his memories that readily, and that is fucking so scattered minded. As you'll be aware if you're listening to the podcast at this point, like, yeah, I'm scattered minded. Like, yeah, even just in the way that I speak every single day, like, you would get it. Even if you just bumped into me in the street, you would understand that. So yeah, big supporter of art therapy. I think everyone should do therapy, to be perfectly honest. I really do. And get to know themselves a bit more and their patterns. So yeah, a bit of a somber one today, isn't it? I actually feel okay. Well, apart from the usual levels of lowness that I'm feeling today and yesterday, but apart from that, yeah, I feel okay. So the art therapist that I go to also does EMDR. Now she thought I would be a good candidate for this, so she actually offered to do like a 6 week cycle of EMDR. It's essentially like eye movements, and you go in, sorry, by like you think of a particularly troubling or what's the word? Yeah, let's just go with troubling. A particularly troubling memory that you feel is causes you discomfort still or whatever, on like a scale of 1 to 10, and the system's a bit bonkers, but it fucking works. I'm telling you. And the reason I want to bring this up is because of how trauma is stored in the body, and how I have processed it, or how I have come to understand it a bit more in my body. So I didn't know that trauma was stored in the connective tissues or in the fascia. I didn't know that. I had a theory a long time ago that I thought it would be, but I didn't know that it actually was. Or once again, in theory, I can't prove this 100% at all. I'm sure there people are working towards trying to prove it. Like Professor Vander I can't remember the name, but The Body Keeps the Score. That's a good book for reading into how the body holds trauma emotionally and physically. Anyway, so EMDR is essentially you're thinking about this memory, you connect to it, and I know it as like I follow an eye movement essentially, and then I connect to it, and then I relay what comes up in that process to my therapist, and then we talk about it, we connect to something else, and then we go back into the eye movement. And I don't know how it works. I don't know, but in the process of doing this, I have experienced release. I get a lot of shivers. I get these little energetic shivers quite a lot, and when I do breath work, I normally feel them, and it feels like a little release. It's how like a mouse or an animal will like shake off after they've been frightened, or they've experienced like something almost eating them. That's kind of what it feels like. It's like I'm shaking the feeling off, or something's releasing. So I get these little shivers quite a lot when I do breath work, and in EMDR as well. I've had some massive like full body shake shivers that just come and go, and they're indescribably weird. And I've had twitches, I've had itches, I've had my like similar feelings to how I was in a certain memory. Like there was a memory that I was working through where it involved me as a child, like screeching and crying and this and that, but I could literally feel like I was screeching and crying within my face, and I was in a safe enough place to be able to process that and to be able to be like held in that space, not physically, but yeah, and I could feel it. I could feel the heat in my face, and I could feel my cheeks swelling up and my eyes and everything, but I wasn't crying. It felt like I was, and it even felt like I was, like my throat was about to, how it gets all like watery, and anyway, yeah, I could literally feel all the emotion and stuff, and after that it kind of whittled away, and then as I say, I got twitches, I got cramps, I get aches sometimes in certain places, and not just in one place. Like there was one memory that I worked through where I started to feel a tremendous amount of weight in my shoulders. I got sore back, this and that, and as we progressed through it, that feeling left, and then the amount of discomfort that I felt from these memories was like so diminished, and it almost felt like invalidating. Like I've had this thing that's caused me so much suffering over the years, or this memory that's caused me so much pain, or whatever, or however you want to word it, and it's conditioned me to live a certain way, and then boop, like it's just gone. Or not boop, it's just gone. It's quite diminishing, but yeah, it's incredible. EMDR is, I can't even wrap my head around it. I really can't, but it's incredible. It really is. And yeah, and that's where I'm at now. So that's I started counselling when I was 22, and through a long time of still abusing weed and still abusing drink and drugs to an extent as well. I guess the whole time that I was doing that, I was always seeking something more. I always wanted to feel more, or I just wanted to feel happy, or I wanted to be able to enjoy. I think at the core of it really was that I wanted to be able to enjoy life. This might be hard to like digest. But I didn't start to really actually find a sense of enjoyment in things until I started to like take antidepressants nowadays. So I've been on antidepressants for 4 months, and it wasn't until then that I started to feel a sense of enjoyment in my life again. Like I've probably felt that before, but I couldn't remember the last time that I had. I genuinely couldn't remember that, except when I was on something, I was high or I was drunk. That was that feeling of enjoyment was something I've never had. So to be able to feel that off drugs or off alcohol or without weed is huge, and I'm very very pleased, as you can imagine, the fact that I am where I am now and I don't have to rely on substances to make myself feel good or feel happy. And yes, of course, yoga has always made me feel quite good, but that, guess what? After you've practiced yoga for an hour and you're not really, well, you're depressed. Like after you've done that, you've still got 23 other hours left in the day. So what are you going to do for 23 hours? Are you going to sit and meditate and escape your problems there, or are you going to like do breath work or pranayama, or are you going to recite mantras for 23 hours? Like I don't think so. Like yes, yoga is something that we embody and we live through all the time, but we have a lot of underlying issues in our lives. Some of us, not everyone, but I have a lot of underlying issues, and yoga can't cure my depression. It can't cure my mental illness. It can't do that. It just can't. Medication can help. It's not going to cure it. It's going to help me cope with it. And this is something that I want to reiterate: is that like mental illness isn't something that you can cure in some people. Like I don't know, I'm not a fucking affirmative body in science here, but from my understanding of my depression and other people's depression that I know and live with and have lived with and have been very good friends with and continue to be very good friends with, is that this isn't something that's curable. It's something that you learn to cope with and you learn to manage and you learn to live and find stuff that helps you deal with it. Yeah, some people are much worse than others, and it's not comparable. Trauma and mental illness is not comparable. Yeah, everyone has their own shit, and that's theirs. Okay, and one thing we shouldn't be is ignorant to how people cope. Medication might not work for everyone. I didn't want it for a long time, 5-6 years, and now finally, I genuinely feel like it's making a big difference in my life after 4 months. I feel stable, and I feel more able to tackle the sort of stuff that I'm able to get to in therapy now. I actually think I'm more able to access these things in therapy because of my medication. And in the end, I hope to not have to be on medication. But if I have to for the rest of my life, I don't fucking care. Because it helps. It helps me, and if I can feel a sense of enjoyment in my life after taking medication for the first time in 28 fucking years, I'm not going to let someone shit all over that just because they think I shouldn't be on medication, or that medication isn't useful for me, or that no one should be on medication because there's a root cause to the depression. Well, guess what? The depression's not fucking going anywhere. I've been in therapy for this long, and I still haven't found the root cause of my depression. So, stop being such an ignorant prick, and just... Sorry, this is a bit of a personal one. It's something that happened to me recently, is that someone was a bit ignorant to the fact that I'd started taking medication. And it really pissed me off. So anyway, this isn't the place for that. But, yeah, everyone has their own journeys, and let's not be so dogmatic about how we think people should live their lives. Like, I don't know how people should live their lives. Live the life that you want to live. Like, this is how I want to live mine. Finally, after all of these years of repeated journal entries saying that I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to smoke weed, I don't want to do this, blah, 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 blah. Every fucking week, or every other day, saying like, oh, I don't want to smoke today. 6 hours later, oh, fuck, I smoked today. Like, I'm finally in a place that I want to be. Finally. And I'm in a direction that I know is the right direction. And as very aptly put from years ago, my feet are genuinely pointing in the same direction now. It doesn't feel like I have 1 foot going forward and 1 foot going back. It doesn't feel like I'm clinging onto a past version of myself. That it was easier to just escape into a bliss of sort of smoking. That I was just escaping that whole time. Because it was easy. Like, yeah, I have to do the fucking hard work. I have to put in the work, and I have to show up every week in therapy, and I have to look at my conditioning, and I have to look at why I am the way I am, just so I can feel better. I have to understand how I react to things, because that helps me to not react in that way. And, like, I'm not a massively reactive person anyway. I'm quite, like, I'm quite able nowadays to to sit back and see my reaction coming up, and sort of, not all the time obviously, but to sort of take a step back and to just notice it and maybe stay quiet for a while first before acting. Sometimes, not all the time. I'm not perfect, obviously, as you can fucking imagine. But yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling a bit lost at this point. I don't have a fucking clue what I'm talking about now. Yeah, everyone has their own fucking journeys, so let's all just let each other live. And if something helps you, great. If it doesn't help someone else, great. I'm sure they have their own things that are going to help them. But let's not shit on other people. Let's not do that. Let's let people live their lives, and just because you think something doesn't mean someone else should think the same thing. Just because you're not on medication doesn't mean that someone else should be, and vice versa. I don't think that everyone should be on medication. Whatever. Everyone's different. But let's just live our fucking lives. Let's just live our fucking lives, eh? So thanks for listening to this rather strange podcast episode. It's gone on a little bit longer. Isn't that amazing how long I can talk about myself? It's gone on a little bit longer than I would have liked it to have been, but yeah, it's probably not been the greatest of listening anyway. But I'm still going to share it because I think that all of this stuff is valuable, and I think it's quite raw. That, you know, this is my journey. Like, yeah, I've used substances for a very long time, and I use that to probably cope with my ADHD symptoms as well, or traits, or whatever you want to call them, and maybe to mask them, to mask the reality of my life. And yeah, that's just the way it is. Like, yeah, I used to drink an awful fucking lot. I used to drink all the time. I used to go into the pub by myself, and have a couple of pints, and then go home and smoke and yada yada. You know, whatever. But we're here now, and I don't do that anymore. I don't drink. I don't smoke. And I don't smoke cigarettes. It's been 4 months of not drinking. It's been 2 years of not smoking weed, and it's been 1 year and, I don't know, 10 months of not smoking cigarettes. So well done me, and well done you for everything that you've accomplished, big or small. So thank you again for listening, and I'm going to leave it here because I'm probably just going to be in one of those moods where I'll just keep talking. So thank you again for listening, and I'm sure you will hear my voice again soon. So thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.